My name is Georgina Rodriguez, and today we will be examining why athletes train in high altitudes. Even more specifically, what high altitude training does to the hemoglobin oxygen equilibrium system in our body. This will include the benefits, drawbacks, and the issues that this type of training may cause. So to start off, the first question is to be asked, well, what really is hemoglobin and how does it relate to altitude training? Well, I'm glad you asked. The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines hemoglobin as a protein in the blood that aids with the transport of oxygen to our cells. Hemoglobin consists of 4 parts, which each part can bind to an oxygen. Hemoglobin binds to the oxygen in our lungs and then transports the oxygen to the tissue where it needs to be released. Then the hemoglobin transports back to the lungs where the process is repeated. So, what happens when this equilibrium is shifted due to high altitudes? The equilibrium equation of hemoglobin and oxygen in our body is Hb aqueous plus O2 gas is in equilibrium with HbO2 aqueous. As air pressure decreases, altitude increases. But why does this happen? Why does high altitude lack oxygen? Altitude.org further explains that in a given volume of air, there are fewer molecules present. At any given altitude, the percentage of molecules that are oxygen is 21%, but the fewer molecules of everything is present. So although the percentage of oxygen in the atmosphere is the same, the less molecules means the thinner air. This means there is less oxygen to breathe in higher altitudes. Less molecules equals thinner air, which equals to less oxygen to breathe. According to an article posted on altitude.org, higher altitudes have less amount of air molecules. Proportionally, the amount of hemoglobin in our blood increases at high altitudes. The lack of oxygen at high altitudes forces our body to acclimate, thus increasing the production of oxygen and hemoglobin to our cells. In other words, the equilibrium shown above must work harder to make up for the lack of oxygen in the air. By doing so, the equilibrium shifts to left because our bodies will need more oxygen being carried out to keep our bodies functioning. So, how does our body acclimate to high altitudes? The reason we breathe harder and faster at high altitudes is to get as much more oxygen in our lungs and then to our cells. Therefore, for the equilibrium to be maintained, the amount of oxygen must be the same as on sea level by breathing heavier and deeper. So the big question comes back. Why do athletes train at high altitudes? What are the benefits? For athletes to excel to their full capability, the production of oxygen in their body needs to be increased. While our bodies are working faster, more energy must be made, which means cellular respiration needs to take place. By training at higher altitudes, it is proven that training might be harder because more oxygen must be taken in. However, by returning to sea level for competitions, the effects of training at high altitudes can last up to 2 weeks. They have a higher concentration of red blood cells in their body that makes performing at sea level less tiring. An example of a successful story of high-altitude training was reported and published on the CBC website, claiming that 6 Canadian athletes qualified for the 2016 Rio Olympics. Their training was in Flagstaff, Arizona, where the altitude was 7,000 feet above the sea level, which led to the athletes' victories. But this makes another question rise. If higher altitude training has so many benefits, why doesn't everyone do it? Based on the High Altitude and Athletic Training article, high altitude training also has many drawbacks. For starters, having too many red blood cells in your system result in your blood to become more thick and blood flow slower. This can result in your heart having a harder time to pump the blood and could potentially decrease the amount of oxygen in your body. Another downfall is also that training intensity decreases due to the lack of oxygen. Although your body trains to transport oxygen better, intensity is being decreased. Depending on the certain person, some side effects one can experience are headaches, suppressed immune function, and decrease in appetite. Another major drawback of high altitude training is called hypoxia, which is when the brain doesn't get enough oxygen to function due to the rapid change in altitude. This can result in unconsciousness. So for the final question that has been worth discussing the past few years, is high altitude training ethical? As Ben Griffin and Michael Chiavatti state in their article explaining the science of altitude training, the International Olympic Committee has banned the use of simulated altitude training devices within the confines of Olympic Village since Sydney 2000. This includes blood doping, which is the addition of red blood cells in the system through drug use. Although altitude training is the addition of red blood cells, it is through our body's natural processes, therefore as of right now is ethical. So the hemoglobin oxygen equilibrium is extremely important to our body. Without it, and without it altering to the circumstances we're in, high altitude training would not be possible for many athletes. Thank you.